The storm didn't come gentle. It arrived, like a living thing with teeth and memory and a grudge older than the mesa itself. Down from the high country it rolled, a wall of white knives slicing the sky open, spilling snow so thick it swallowed the red buttes whole. By dusk, the world was gone, buried, silent. Only the moon dared show its face, turning the drifts ghost blue, like the breath of the dead rising from the earth to remind the living. They were only borrowing time. Wind screamed across the flats, not a howl, a shriek, the kind that finds the cracks in a man's soul and whistles through them. It rattled the shutters of a lone cabin, tucked hard against a rise of juniper and sandstone, as if the mountain had grown the place from its own bones to hide from the world. Inside, a single oil lamp burned low. Its flame danced over scarred hands. Broad, sure calloused from rope and rain and the slow, patient work of breaking wild things without breaking their spirits. Caleb Redhawk sat close to the hearth, knees wide, working a strip of rawhide across his knee. The bridle had snapped clean that morning. Young mare, green as spring grass, full of fire and fear and the kind of strength that doesn't know its own edges yet. He spliced the brake with steady fingers, the rhythm of the work keeping his thoughts from wandering too far into the dark places, where Lena still walked. He was 32, shoulders thick from years. Under the desert sun that baked a man's skin, until it cracked like dry riverbed, sun that taught you to read the sky before you read a man's face. Black hair tied back with a scrap of faded cloth, once red, now the color of old blood. A pale scar cut the left side of his face, thin, clean, the kind left by a cavalry carbine fired in anger, and fear in the kind of righteousness that only comes from men who've never had to bury their own. A war the treaties said was over, a war that never ended. For men like him, on the mantel, above the hearth rested a small pouch, hawk, feathers bound with sinew, a few beads of turquoise, a single eagle claw, a spirit bundle for Lena, his wife. Gone 3 winters now. Every night he fed the fire a twist of sage, gathered from the south slope where the sun hit first, where the plants grew strong and bitter. The smoke curled up the chimney, out into the indifferent dark, carrying her name with it. 3 winters alone. Silence had become his only companion. Silence and the wild horses that still came to him, snorting, wary, ears flat, eyes rolling white, trusting. Only the quiet man with the scarred face and the low voice that spoke in the old tongue when no one was listening. The wind rose again, fierce enough to shake the door in its frame like a drunk trying to get in. Caleb rose slow, joints stiff from the cold that seeped through the logs no matter how tight he chinked them. He checked the latch. Iron, hand-forged, strong enough to hold back more than wind. Glanced through the frosted pane, the herd huddled by the corral. 6 head, maybe 7, dark shapes against the white, breath steaming in clouds, eyes catching the moon like coals in a dying fire. Tomorrow he'd break open another bale from the stack behind the barn. Hay cut in late summer, sweet with timothy and clover. The last good crop before the drought came, if the snow held. If the world didn't end tonight. He was turning back to the fire, back to the rawhide, back to the silence, when it came. Knock, knock, knock. 3. Hard raps, not wind, not creaking timber, not the barn door banging loose. Again, human, urgent, deliberate. The sound cut through the storm, like a knife through rawhide. His hand found the rifle. By the door, Winchester, oiled, loaded. Always within reach. The stock was worn smooth from years of carry, the barrel cold as truth. No one rode this far after. Dark, not whites with their paper claims and their fear, not drifters with their hollow eyes and their hunger, not even the wandering vaqueros who sometimes cut through the canyons with their silver bits in their silent eyes and their songs about women they'd never see again. He waited a long breath, listened. The wind paused, just for a heartbeat, as if the storm itself was holding its Breath, then he slid the bar, cracked. The door. Snow exploded inward, stinging his face like buckshot. Through the swirl stood a child. Small, shaking, hair, iced to her scalp like frost on a winter branch. Girl, maybe 7, maybe less. Cheeks raw from cold, hands cracked red and bleeding, boots split at the seams, dress hem frozen stiff, eyes too wide, too desperate for a child. "Please," she rasped. Voice thin as wire, barely audible over the wind. "He's hurting my ma." The words landed heavy, like stones in still water, ripples spreading through his chest. Caleb studied her, took in every detail. The way her knees knocked together, the way her breath came in sharp, panicked puffs, the way her fingers clutched at nothing. The old rule rang in his skull: stay clear of white. Troubles, every man of his blood who forgot paid in red, paid with scalps, paid with children, dragged behind wagons, paid with names. Erased from the land, but the girl's eyes, they were Lena's eyes the night the fever took. Her pleading, trusting, believing that one man, one quiet man, could still change the shape of the world. Abby knelt slow, so they were eye to eye. Where? Down by the creek. House with the leaning shed. 1/2 mile, maybe less, through knee-deep white, through wind that could flay skin from bone. He looked once at the fire. Warm, steady, safe, the sage smoke still rising, Lena's bundle still watching, then at the child's trembling shoulders, at the ice in her hair, at the blood on her hands. Stay. Close, coat, lantern, rifle. He stepped into the storm. They moved without speaking. Wind knifed their faces, sharp as obsidian, cold as a grave. Snow filled their tracks almost as fast as they made them, erasing their passage like the land itself wanted no record of this night. Twice the girl stumbled, legs too short, strength nearly gone. Boots too big for her feet. Caleb lifted her under one arm, light as kindling, her body shivering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He shifted the lantern to his other hand, the rifle slung across his back. Only the crunch of his boots and the groan of ice-laden pines broke the night. The lantern swung low, a small sun in a world gone mad, its flame guttering in the gale but refusing to die. He didn't ask her name, not yet. Names were heavy things in a storm. They carried weight, expectation, history. Instead, he spoke to the wind in his mother's tongue, low, steady, a prayer older than the mesa, older than the treaties, older than the scars on his face. Carry us. Guard the child. Let the path hold. Let the ancestors walk beside us. The girl clung to his coat, small fingers twisted in wool so tight he felt it in his bones. Her breath came in shivers, sharp, panicked, the sound of a soul trying to outrun its own ending. He felt her heartbeat, fast, frantic like a Mustang cornered by wolves. He shifted her higher, pressed her face into his shoulder to shield it from the gale. 1/2 mile. In this white, it might as well have been 10. The creek appeared first, a black ribbon under the snow, frozen solid, its voice silenced by the cold. Then the shack, sagging. One window glowing yellow through the dark, a sickly eye in the dark, blinking against the storm. Door banging in the gale like a drunk trying to get in, or trying to keep something out. From inside, a slurred curse, the crack of a hand on flesh, a woman's stifled cry, cut short, like a song strangled in the throat. Caleb set the lantern in the snow. The flame flickered, nearly drowned but held. "Wait here," he told the girl. "Don't move till I call." She nodded, teeth chattering so hard he heard them click, eyes wide as moons, reflecting the lantern's dying light. He crossed the yard, silent. Boots found purchase where the snow was thin, where the wind had scoured it down to frozen earth. The air reeked of sour mash and wood smoke and something darker, fear, thick as blood. Inside, a man sprawled in a broken chair, bottle in fist, laughing through a beard crusted with spit and ice and the kind of meanness that grows in men who've never been told no. On the floor lay a woman, wrists roped, hair matted across a bruised face, still breathing, barely. Her Chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged pulls. The drunk lurched up when Caleb's shadow filled the doorway. Tall, still, silent. "Get out," Caleb said. Nothing. Firelight slid along his scar like a blade unsheathed. I said, "The bottle swung, a wild arc, meant to crush skull." Meant to end the conversation before it began. Caleb caught the wrist mid-air, twisted. Bone snapped like green wood in a drought. Sharp. Final. The sound of something breaking. That would never mend right. The bottle shattered against the floorboards, glass and whiskey. Exploding in a sharp spray that smelled of rot and regret. The drunk screamed, a high, animal sound that belonged to something cornered. Reached for the pistol at his hip with his good hand. Caleb's fist answered. Once. Solid. Final. The drunk folded like a sack of meal. Sprawling across the hearth, blood trickling from his mouth. Steaming in the cold air that rushed through the open door, Caleb knelt. The skinning knife flashed, rope parted like lies. Like promises, like the thin veneer of civilization. He lifted the woman. She weighed next to nothing. Less than a saddle. Less than a bale of hay. Less than the guilt he carried for Lena. Her pulse fluttered weak beneath his fingers, birdwing fragile. He wrapped his coat around her, stepped into the storm. The girl ran to meet them. Tears froze on her cheeks like tiny diamonds catching the lantern light. She breathing? For now, come. The climb back was brutal. Snow clung to his lashes, to his beard, to the woman's hair. Breath burned in his lungs like fire. Sarah hung limp in his arms, head lolling. Breath shallow. The girl stumbled behind, then ahead, then under his arm again. He carried them both, one under each arm now, like bundles of sticks wrapped in wool, like the last fragile things in a world that had forgotten how to be kind. The lantern had gone out. Only the faint glow from the cabin guided them. Warm. Steady, a beacon in the white. Half a mile, a lifetime. He didn't feel the cold, only the weight, only the promise. Let me take you back, to the moment before the storm became a reckoning. The shack crouched by the frozen creek like a wounded animal. One window glowed yellow, a sickly eye in the dark. Blinking against the storm, the door slammed open and shut with every gust, as if the house itself was trying to scream. Inside, the air was thick with sour mash, smoke, and the copper tang of blood. The man in the broken chair called himself Harlan. He had a beard like a bramble bush, eyes red as a coyote's in torchlight. Bottle in his fist was nearly empty. He laughed at nothing. Laughed. At the woman on the floor, laughed at the rope around her. Wrists. Laughed, because the world had taught him cruelty was the only language it understood. She lay curled on her side, hair tangled across her face, bruises blooming, like storm clouds under her skin. Her name was Sarah, but names didn't matter here, not anymore. Then the shadow fell across the doorway. Tall, still, silent. Harlan looked up. The laughter died in his throat. "Get out," Caleb Redhawk said. Nothing. Firelight slid along the scar on his cheek like a blade. Unsheathed, I said. The bottle swung, a wild arc, meant to crush skull. Caleb caught the wrist mid-air, twisted bone. Snapped like green wood in a drought. The bottle shattered, glass, and whiskey exploded. Harlan screamed, reached for the pistol. Caleb's fist landed, once. Solid, the drunk folded. Caleb knelt, cut the rope, lifted Sarah, wrapped his coat around her, stepped into the storm. Lila ran to them. Tears froze on her cheeks. She breathing? For now. Come. The climb back was brutal. Snow clung, breath burned. He carried them both. The cabin appeared. Warmth hit like a slap. The climb back was brutal. Snow clung to his lashes like frost on a winter branch, clung to his beard, to the woman's hair, to the child's frozen tears. Breath burned in his lungs like fire. Sharp, clean, the kind of pain that reminds a man he's still alive. Sarah hung limp in his arms, head lolling, breath shallow, pulse fluttering weak beneath his fingers like a bird with a broken wing. Lila stumbled behind, then ahead, then under his arm again. He carried them both. One under each arm now, like bundles of sticks wrapped in wool, like the last fragile things in a world that had forgotten how to be kind. The lantern had gone out, snuffed by the wind or by the weight of the night. Only the faint glow from the cabin guided them, warm, steady, a beacon in the white, a promise he hadn't made but now carried like a brand, half a mile, a lifetime. He didn't feel the cold, only the weight, only the promise. His boots found the path by memory, every dip, every stone, every root hidden under the snow. He'd walked this trail 1,000 times, to check the herd at dawn, to gather sage at dusk, to sit on the ridge and watch the sun bleed out over the mesa, painting the cliffs the color of old blood. But never like this. Never with two souls pressed against his chest, one barely breathing, one barely believing. The wind screamed, not with rage now, but with sorrow, as if the storm itself mourned what it had witnessed. Lila's voice came small, muffled against his coat. "Is Mama gonna die?" Caleb didn't answer right away. Words were heavy things in a storm. They could freeze in the air, break on the wind. "No," he said finally. "Not tonight." The girl nodded, trusted. As only the very young can, the cabin appeared at last, a dark shape against the white, then a glow, soft, golden, spilling from the window like warm honey. He kicked the door open with a boot that had walked 100 miles of grief. Warmth hit like a slap, like a benediction, like a memory of Lena's hands on his face the night she said, "You carry too much, Caleb. Let the land hold some." He laid Sarah on his bunk, the only bed, the one he'd built with his own hands from pine felled on the north slope. Piled blankets, wool, thick and gray, traded from a Navajo woman 3 canyons over. Bare hide, taken with respect, the spirit thanked with tobacco and song. The quilt Lena had sewn the winter before she died, patches of blue and red, each square a story, each stitch a prayer. He fed the fire till it roared. Logs cracked and popped, sending sparks up the chimney like fireflies fleeing the dark. The girl, Lila, hovered, clutching her mother's hand, small fingers white with cold. Caleb crushed dried yarrow and willow, bark in a tin cup, herbs gathered in late summer, dried on the rafters, strong with the memory of sun. Mixed a poultice with hot water from the kettle that never left the stove, pressed it to the worst bruises. Cheek, swollen purple, ribs, cracked and tender, wrists, raw from rope, skin split like overripe fruit. Sarah stirred, murmured something lost in fever. A name maybe, Thomas or Lena or just the wind. He poured hot water for the child. Plain, no herbs, just warmth. Sip slow. Lila looked up, eyes wide, trusting. "What's your name?" "Caleb Redhawk," she nodded, as if the name meant something, as if it carried weight, as if it was a promise. He took the chair by the hearth, the one with the cracked leg, the one he'd meant to fix for 3 winters. Watched snow slide past the window in sheets, like ghosts trying to get in. The horses would keep till morning. He had broken his own rule. Never again after Lena. Never interfere. Never open the door. Never let the world in. Yet here he was. Fire popped. He whispered a short prayer in his mother's tongue. Low, steady, the words older than the cabin, older than the scar, older than the war. Guard what you have given. Let the fire hold. Let the night pass. The storm eased toward dawn. Wind dropped to a moan. Snow fell softer, like ash from a dying fire. Inside, 3 souls breathed the same fragile air. The man, the woman, the child he'd pulled from the cold. The fire settled. The sage smoke rose. Lena's bundle watched from the mantel, and for the first time in 3 winters, the silence was not empty. Dawn came pale, The world lay hushed under white so deep the fence posts had vanished, like they'd never been, like the land had swallowed its own bones. Sarah woke to cedar smoke and pain. Memory rushed back. Fists, cold, a shadow that ended it. She turned her head. Caleb fed the fire. Light catching the hard planes of his face, cheekbones sharp as flint, eyes dark as midnight water. For an instant he looked like Thomas, long dead, long mourned, the man who'd taught her that love could live in silence. Then she saw the scar, the stillness, the weight of years, and knew he was not. Lila touched her arm. "Mama." Sarah gathered the child close, tears pricking hot behind her eyes. "You hurt." The girl shook her head. "He carried us." Sarah's gaze found Caleb. He didn't look up. Just fed another log to the flames. Slow, deliberate, the way a man prays when words fail. "Why?" The question hung in the air like smoke. He didn't answer right. A way stirred the fire instead. Sparks rose. "Child came to my door," he said finally. That was enough. He poured water from the kettle, steam curling like spirits, handed her a tin cup. She took it with trembling fingers, drank heat, stung her split lip, but it felt like life returning, like blood in frozen veins. Outside snow fell again, softer now. Like the storm was tired, like it had done its worst and was ready to sleep. Lila traced frost patterns on the glass with one finger, circles, stars, a tiny horse. Caleb moved about the cabin, checked the stove, sliced jerky thin as paper, set broth to simmer, venison. Wild onion, sage, the kind of meal that fed body and soul. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and healing. Herbs and something else, something Sarah hadn't smelled in years. "Safety. Your Diné," she said at last. He nodded once. "Slow. My husband hates your kind." Noticed something in his dry tone. Almost drew a smile from her. It died. Quick. Shame settled cold in her gut, like snow in a boot. "You should have left us." "Already did," he said, stirring the broth, still breathing. By noon she could sit. Bruises darkened, purple, yellow. The map of a war fought in the dark. But her eyes cleared. She learned they were 2 miles from the settlement, high on the mesa's shoulder. "Lonely place," she said. "Chose it for that." Lila found a small cedar horse on a shelf, mane carved fine, eyes inlaid with bits of obsidian. She ran it across the floorboards, making soft hoofbeats. Clop, clop, clop. Sarah watched, throat tight. Caleb watched too, expression unreadable. The cabin had known only his footsteps for 3 winters. Now laughter, uncertain but real, echoed against the log walls. Sarah saw the flicker in his eyes. "You live alone?" "Did. Family?" The question closed like a gate, hard final. She let it go, still. She recognized the silence, same one she'd carried through years of fear, through nights of hiding bruises under long sleeves, through mornings of pretending. The blood on the floor was just spilled coffee. Outside, wind shifted. Caleb crossed to the window, gaze narrowing at something beyond the white. Word would crawl to the settlement soon. Indian harboring a white woman. Rumor traveled faster than any horse, faster than truth. Sarah spoke softly. "He'll come. Then he'll have to find me." Night fell. Lila slept on a pallet by the fire. Cedar horse clutched tight. Sarah lay awake. Caleb sharpened a knife, steel whispering on stone. Steady as a heartbeat after a long hush, she said, "You remind me of someone." "Who?" "My first love. His name was Thomas Redhawk." The knife stopped. Caleb looked up. "Slow. Thomas was my brother, Sarah's." Breath caught. She hadn't meant to. "Speak the name." The fire trembled across her face. "Soldiers killed him on the San Pedro. I was there." Silence. Thick as smoke. Finally, she whispered, "He'd have liked you." Caleb gave a faint, sad smile. "He was the better man." Sarah glanced at her sleeping child. She would have liked him too. Winter deepened. Each dawn came grey. Breath froze in beards. Tracks appeared along the creek. 3 horses, heavy, riding toward town. Caleb said nothing to Sarah. Some truths were carried alone. One afternoon, 3 riders came slow along the creek. One carried a cross of wood lashed to his saddle, symbol of the church in Clay Hollow. The one with the cracked bell and the preacher who quoted scripture like a weapon. Caleb saw them first, through the window. Jaw clenched tight as a snare. Stay inside. He stepped out, coat whipping in the wind. Snow crunching under boots that had walked battlefields and burials. The lead rider, a thin man in a wool coat and black hat, lifted a hand. "Morning, Redhawk." "Reverend Cole, Sheriff sent me to ask questions." Caleb said nothing. His eyes were level, unreadable, dark as the space between stars. "Word says you've taken in a white woman. Folks are uneasy. A woman beaten near death needed help. That's all. Law sees it different. Her husband's in town, bruised, claiming assault and theft." Sarah stepped to the doorway despite the warning. Shawl clutched tight, eyes wide. Face pale but unbroken. "I'm not going back," she said. "He'll kill me next time." Cole looked at her. Pity flickering in his expression like a candle in wind. "Ma'am, the world won't see it that way. They'll say the Indian lured you." "Then let them say," Caleb said, voice flat, final. The Reverend sighed, snow settling on his hat brim like ash. "You're a stubborn man, Redhawk. I'll tell the sheriff you're keeping peace, but I can't promise the others will." They rode away. Their tracks vanished behind them almost instantly, erased by the wind, like they'd never been. Sarah stepped onto the porch beside Caleb. "You shouldn't have argued." "I didn't. Arguing means I care what they think." That night, the weight of the visit settled over the cabin like another storm. Sarah tried to help, sweeping the floor with a broom made from willow branches, mending a torn shirt with stitches small and neat. But guilt pressed on her shoulders like a yoke. She could feel the danger growing because of her presence. When Caleb returned from the barn, hands red from cold, she spoke quietly. "I should leave." He looked at her, expression unmoved. "Go where?" "North, to my sister in Prescott." "You'd never make the passes this time of year. And even if you did, he'd find you." "Men like him always find what they think they own." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Then what will happen to you?" "The Reverend's right. They'll call this kidnapping." Caleb poured water into a tin cup, voice steady as stone. "Let them call it what they want." I don't answer to their words, but she wanted to. Wanted to make him see the cost of his mercy, but something in his calm stopped her. He moved like a man who had already made peace with danger long ago, like a man who'd buried his heart and kept walking. Lila, sensing her mother's unease, came to sit on her lap. "Mama." "He's not bad," the child whispered. "He's like a mountain. The wind yells, but it can't move him." Sarah held her close, fighting a tremor of fear and gratitude both. Night returned, heavy and blue. The fire burned low. Caleb sat sharpening a small knife, the steel whispering against stone, steady as a heartbeat, steady as a prayer. Sarah broke the silence. "The Reverend said Clay Hollow remembers too much blood." "What did he mean?" Caleb's eyes stayed on the blade. "My people fought here. When the soldiers came, Thomas fought beside them, believing peace could be earned. The town saw that as betrayal. When he died, they called it justice. When I lived, they called it mercy gone wrong." Sarah's voice shook. "I never knew. Now you do." For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of fire. Then Sarah said softly, "Thomas would be proud you're still standing." Caleb set the knife down. "Pride won't change the way they look at me." "No," she said. "But maybe kindness will." He glanced at her, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Kindness doesn't last long in the West, Sarah, but maybe this time it'll hold till spring." Outside, the wind began again, whispering through the cedars like a warning. Inside, Lila slept, curled near the fire, the wooden horse in her arms. Caleb watched her, feeling the strange pull of something he couldn't name, a tie deeper than blood. older than the land itself. He didn't yet know the truth, but some part of him sensed it already. Caleb taught Lila to feed the horses, lifted her onto the corral rail, handed her a handful of oats, golden, sweet, smelling of summer. The mare, Whisper Chestnut with a white blaze, nuzzled the girl's palm, soft lips brushing tiny fingers. "She likes you," Caleb said, "because I'm quiet." "Too," Lila grinned. He chuckled low. "Quiet's a strength, not a weakness. Remember that." Sarah watched from the cabin window. The sight filled her chest with something she hadn't felt in years. Peace mixed with dread, like sunlight on a grave. Caleb's patience with her daughter, his calm steadiness. It reminded her of Thomas again, yet deeper, forged from grief and solitude and the kind of silence that holds entire worlds. That night, after Lila slept, Sarah spoke. "I heard you this morning, speaking to the horses. It wasn't English." "My tongue," he said. "Diné, what did you say?" Caleb hesitated, then replied, "I asked the land to keep them safe, and to forgive me if it couldn't." Sarah's voice trembled. "You think we're in danger?" "I think men like your husband don't forget shame." "The storm outside isn't the one I'm watching." She shivered despite the fire. "Maybe I should go." He shook his head. "He'd find you before you reach the pass." "The only safe place now is here." "Safe?" she whispered, glancing toward the door. "You call this safe?" Caleb's gaze softened. "It's safer than anywhere else, with me between you and him." Her breath caught. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped and snow drifted quietly outside the window. "Why do you care?" she asked finally. "You don't even know me." He looked into the flames. "I know what it means to lose someone and be left standing after. No one deserves that." Sarah studied him, her eyes glistening in the firelight. She wanted to tell him about Thomas, about the child he'd never met, about the life she'd hidden out of fear, but the words tangled in her throat. The truth was too heavy to set free. Not yet. Next morning brought signs of change. The wind shifted south, sharp, restless. Crows gathered on the ridge, their cries cutting through the cold air like warnings. When Caleb went to fetch water from the well, he saw fresh hoofprints again, closer this time, circling like wolves testing a fence. He returned inside. "Jaw tight. If anyone rides this way, you and Lila stay low." "Don't open that door unless it's me." Sarah's hand trembled around her cup. "You saw them?" He nodded once. 3 riders. Same as before. She bit her lip. "He's coming." "Yes," Caleb said quietly. "He is." That evening, the first flakes of snow began to fall again, slow, deliberate, like the start of a prayer. Caleb worked at the window, hammering the latch tighter while Sarah set stew on the fire. The scent filled the room, rich with herbs he'd gathered from the ridge. Wild thyme, sage, a pinch of juniper berry. When she brought him a bowl, he nodded in thanks. "You cook better than you think." "I used to hate it," she said, "but lately it feels peaceful." "Peace is something you make," he said. "Same as fire. Same as shelter. It doesn't come on its own." Sarah sat opposite him, watching the flames dance. "You speak like someone older than 32. Loss ages a man faster than years." They ate in silence. The only sound, the soft wind outside, Lila's breathing, the crackle of logs. After a while, Sarah spoke again, voice trembling. "If they come, if something happens, promise me you'll protect her first." Caleb set his bowl down. "You don't have to." "Ask, promise me," she insisted. He met her eyes. "I swear." The words settled between them, solid as stone. Later, when the fire burned low, Sarah stirred from her blanket. "Caleb?" He looked up from where he sat, sharpening a blade. "If I don't make it through this, I need you to know something." He frowned. "Don't talk like that." "It's important," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Lila. She's Thomas's daughter." The knife paused mid-air. For a long moment, Caleb didn't move. The room felt suddenly smaller, the silence sharper. "She's what?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to hide it. When Thomas died, I was already carrying her. I married Harlan to keep her safe. to keep the world from knowing. Caleb set the knife down slowly. The fire crackled, its light flickering over his face. Shock, sorrow, and something deeper that even he couldn't name. "All this time," he murmured, "and you never told me. I was afraid you'd hate me, or think I used you." He shook his head. "I don't hate you, Sarah. I just didn't know how close blood could hide itself." He looked toward the sleeping child, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. "She has his eyes," he said softly. Sarah nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I see him in her every day." Caleb's voice dropped low, full of something that sounded like reverence. "Then she's family, and family doesn't get left behind." Outside, thunder rolled again, farther this time, but heavier. The smell of snow thickened in the air, mingled with something metallic, like blood. Caleb rose, crossed to the door, and peered into the dark. Distant along the ridge, faint lanterns moved, 4 of them now, cutting through the wind. "They're coming," he said quietly. Sarah stood, her face pale in the firelight. "Tonight, before dawn." He turned back, eyes steady. "Get Lila ready." "Whatever happens, you stay behind me." Sarah's voice shook. "You can't fight them all." He reached for his rifle, the metal gleaming dull and certain. "Maybe not. But I can make them think twice about coming again." The wind rose, howling against the cabin walls. Snow swept through the cracks, whispering like ghosts between the logs. Sarah moved to his side, trembling, but unbroken. "Then we face it together," she said. He glanced at her, and for the first time, his silence broke into something like a smile. "Together, then." Before dawn, the wind screamed, a sound like the world tearing open. Caleb stepped into the gale, coat whipping, snow slashing sideways. Rifle in hand, 4 riders swayed through the white, lanterns swinging like ghostly stars. One voice rose above the storm. "Redhawk!" It was Harlan, thick with drink and fury, and the kind of hate that festers. "You got something of mine, and I come to take it back." Caleb stepped forward, shadow long against the snow. "You lost the right to claim anything, Harlan." Harlan laughed, harsh, mean. The sound of a man who'd never been afraid of consequences. "You think you can steal my wife? You think that half-breed blood makes you a savior?" Behind him, one of the other men shifted nervously. "Harlan, maybe we wait till the storm." "Shut your mouth," Harlan barked. "I'll handle this." He swung down from his horse, staggered once in the drift, and drew his revolver. The others followed, slow, uncertain, boots sinking deep. Caleb didn't move. The wind howled between them, flinging snow into their faces like buckshot. "I won't warn you again," Caleb said. "Turn back while you can." Harlan spat into the snow. "You ain't the one doing the warning." He raised his gun and fired. The shot cracked through the night, bright, sharp final. Caleb dropped to one knee, the bullet slicing past his shoulder, tearing wool but not flesh. He rolled, brought his rifle up, and fired once. The blast echoed off the cliffs. One of Harlan's men fell backward into the snow, lantern dropping, flames snuffed out by the wind. The other 2 hesitated. "Hell with this," one muttered, but Harlan roared. "You run, and I'll shoot you myself." Caleb chambered another round, breath steady despite the cold burning his lungs. "You can still leave," he called out. "There's no shame in walking away from a dead man's fight." Harlan snarled and charged forward, firing again. Caleb's second shot caught the gun clean from his hand, sending it spinning into the dark. Harlan stumbled, howling with rage. Then he slammed into Caleb. Both men going down in the snow. They rolled, fists swinging, boots sliding across ice. The wind roared around them like a crowd. Harlan landed a wild punch to Caleb's jaw, another to his ribs. Caleb answered with a blow that sent blood flying from Harlan's mouth. Dark against the white, they broke apart, gasping, "Why?" Harlan spat. "She's mine. She was always mine. She was never yours to break," Caleb said. Harlan lunged again, knocking them both into the drift. He reached for a knife at his belt, rusted, cruel, the kind of blade that had tasted blood before. Caleb caught his wrist and twisted hard until the blade fell free. Then, with a sound like thunder, Caleb drove his fist into Harlan's chest, sending him sprawling on his back. The two remaining men stepped forward uncertainly. "Harlan, let it go," one shouted, but Harlan only laughed through broken teeth. "Go on then, Indian. Finish it, that's what you people do, ain't it? Kill what don't belong to you." Caleb rose slowly. Snow plastered his hair to his face. He stood over Harlan, rifle in hand. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of his breath and the hiss of snow across the ground. He could have ended it, one pull of the trigger, and the storm would wash the blood away by morning. But through the noise came another. Sounded a child's cry, carried faint and small from the cabin. "Caleb, dit," was Lila's voice. He froze. That small, trembling voice cut deeper than Harlan's hatred ever could. He lowered the rifle. "This isn't justice," he said quietly. "It's mercy you'll never understand." Harlan stared up at him, disbelief twisting into something close to fear. Caleb stepped back. "Take him," he said to the other men. "Get him out of here before he freezes." They hesitated, then grabbed Harlan by the arms, dragging him to his horse. He cursed, fought, but the fight had gone from his limbs. The storm swallowed their shapes one by one until only the wind remained. Caleb stood a long time in the snow, chest heaving. Blood dripping from his split lip. The rifle hung loose in his hand. The land around him was white and empty, the hogar of silence that comes only after violence. He looked toward the cabin, the faint glow of firelight spilling through the window, and began to walk. When he stepped inside, Sarah rose from the floor, eyes wet with relief. Lila ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you I would." He sank to one knee, resting a hand on her hair. Then he looked at Sarah. Her face was pale but strong, her gaze full of everything words couldn't hold. "It's done," he said. "For now." Sarah moved to him, trembling. "You could have killed him. I know. Why didn't you?" He glanced toward the fire. "Because death doesn't end hate. It just passes it on." She reached for his hand, her fingers cold against his skin. "Then what will you do when they come again?" "I'll face them," he said. "Same as this storm." Lila pressed closer, her small voice barely a breath. "Is it over, Caleb?" He looked down at her, the shadow of a smile touching his mouth. "The storm's passing, little one. That's enough for tonight." He set his rifle aside and sat by the fire. Sarah knelt beside him, her head resting against his shoulder. Outside, the wind softened, turning from a howl to a sigh. Snow fell slower, gentler, as if the land itself had grown tired of anger. For the first time in years, Caleb let the silence mean something different. Not loneliness, not regret, but peace, earned the hard way. Morning came slow, spilling gold across the snow like a mercy the night had earned. The storm had passed. Red Mesa stood clear again, its cliffs washed in pale sunlight, streaked with the red earth beneath the melting frost. Smoke rose steady from Caleb's chimney, thin, peaceful, a prayer in physical form. Inside, the cabin breathed warmth and quiet. Sarah woke first. The fire was only coals now, glowing like the heart of some old beast. Caleb sat in his chair by the hearth, half asleep. Coat still dusted with snow. The rifle leaned beside him, unfired since the night before, but ready. For a long while, she just watched him. The way dawn softened his roughness. The way peace sat awkward on his shoulders like a new coat not yet broken in. Lila stirred on her pallet, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, is it morning?" Sarah smiled and drew her close. "It is, sweetheart. The storm's gone." The girl peered toward the window where sunlight sparkled off the frost. Did Caleb stop it? Sarah brushed a curl from her daughter's face. Maybe he helped. Caleb opened one eye at that, a hint of a grin tugging the corner of his mouth. "Don't go giving me more credit than I deserve." His voice came low and rasped from the cold. The land does what it wants. Lila giggled, and the sound filled the room with something the storm had tried to take. Hope. Later. When the sun rose higher, Caleb stepped outside. The air was sharp, but still, the world glittered clean and new. He could see the tracks from the night before, half buried by fresh snow, the only proof of what had happened. He walked to the barn, checking the horses, running his hands along their warm necks. Whisper nickered softly, breath pluming in the light. Behind him, footsteps crunched. He turned to find Sarah standing near the fence, wrapped in a shawl, her cheeks touched with color again. "You shouldn't be out," he said, still cold enough to bite. "I needed to see it," she replied. "It's strange. Everything looks so calm, like the world forgot what happened." "The world forgets quicker than men," Caleb said. She nodded, gaze tracing the red cliffs. "He'll tell them, won't he?" "The town. He'll tell what suits him and they'll come." Caleb looked out, toward the valley where Clay Hollow slept beneath smoke and distance, maybe. Or maybe they'll decide the snow buried enough ghosts already. Sarah hugged herself for a moment. "When I first met Thomas," she said softly, "he used to talk about peace the way a man talks about rain in a drought. He thought if he could prove one Diné heart was good, the rest of the world would change." Caleb's voice gentled. He believed too much. She glanced at him. "And you?" "I believe what I see, and right now I see two people who shouldn't have survived a storm but did." Sarah smiled faintly. "Maybe that's enough belief for one lifetime." By noon, the sheriff arrived. The crunch of hooves on frozen ground carried long before the rider appeared. A lone figure in a heavy coat, scarf drawn high over his face. He reined in slow at the gate. Raised a gloved hand. Redhawk. Sheriff Dillard. The man's eyes were tired, lined with years of seeing too much and doing too little. Heard about last night. "Harlan came limping into town before dawn, half drunk, half frozen, shouting you tried to kill him." Caleb said nothing. The sheriff sighed, rubbing frost from his beard. "3 witnesses say otherwise. They said you had every right to finish him and didn't. That counts for something in my book." Sarah stepped from the porch then, holding Lila's hand. The sheriff's gaze softened when he saw them. "You all right, ma'am?" She nodded. Thanks to him, Dillard tipped his hat toward Caleb. "That's what I figured." He paused, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. "Still, folks in Clay Hollow will talk." "They always do. Might be best you keep close to the mesa for a while." "I wasn't planning on leaving," Caleb said. "Good. Then I can tell them the matter's settled." The sheriff shifted in his saddle. "World's changing. Redhawk, slow, mean, but it's changing. Maybe one day they'll see what you did here for what it was." He turned his horse, then looked back once. "Take care of that family, you hear?" Caleb inclined his head. "I hear." When the sheriff rode off, his tracks stretched long and lonely through the snow until they disappeared behind the ridge. That evening, the sky burned red over the mesa, clouds glowed like coals, and the wind smelled of thawing earth. Inside, Caleb repaired a broken hinge on the barn door while Sarah stirred stew by the fire. Lila hummed to herself, carving lines into the wooden horse, whispering names to it. Mesa, Whisper, Dawn. Sarah watched her daughter, then looked at Caleb. "She's happy here." He tightened the hinge, testing it. "So is the land." "It likes having laughter again." Sarah smiled softly. "When spring comes, maybe we can plant something." "There's a small patch by the creek." He nodded. "The soil's good there. Red earth holds life even after fire." For a moment, the silence settled between them, comfortable. Deep, then Sarah spoke, voice low. "You know," she asks about her father sometimes, about Thomas. Caleb straightened, eyes shadowed by the dying light. "What do you tell her?" "The truth I can. That he was brave, and that he wanted her to live free." He nodded slowly. "That's enough." Sarah stepped closer, hesitating before touching his arm. "And when she asks about you?" He looked down at her hand, then back to her eyes. "Tell her I'm a man who kept a promise." Later, when darkness came, the 3 of them sat before the fire. Outside, the last snowflakes melted from the eaves, dripping like quiet clocks, marking a new beginning. Lila leaned against Caleb's knee. "Half asleep. Will the bad men come back?" she murmured. "No," he said softly. "The wind carried them away. Will you always stay here?" He paused, then brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "As long as you and your mama need me." Sarah met his gaze across the fire. The light painted her face gold and warm, and for the first time since Thomas's death, she didn't look haunted. "That might be a long time," she said. Caleb's lips curved faintly. "I've got nowhere else to be." Snow turned to streams. Water rushed down from the mesa, carving thin veins through the red soil, carrying pine needles, carrying memory, carrying the last of winter away. The land breathed again. The air smelled of pine and wet earth and promise. Caleb planted corn in the patch by the creek. 3 sisters. Corn, beans, squash, seed saved from last year, blessed with corn pollen and a song his mother taught him. Sarah kneaded bread, her hands strong again. Her laughter light when the dough rose high. Lila named the colts. Dawn, the dun with the white mane. Thunder, the black one with the wild eye. Whisper, the mare who'd nuzzled her palm that first day. One dusk. Sarah waded the creek for watercress, skirt hiked, sunlight in her hair, turning it gold like the fields of her childhood. Caleb rode the ridge at dawn. No tracks. "No eyes on them. She met him at the corral. If they come again, we stand," he said, like the mesa stands fire. Burn what must. Grow stronger after. She touched the scar on his cheek, gentle. Unafraid, Thomas would call this home. It is. That night, under thick stars, Lila slept between them on the porch, cedar horse in her arms. The quilt pulled tight. Sage smoke rose thin and steady from the chimney. Caleb spoke a short blessing into the dark. Words in Diné, words in silence, words in the space between heartbeats. The mesa stretched wide, red and alive. The storm had passed. What remained was theirs. Far above, a red-tailed hawk circled in the new light, its cry cutting sharp through the clean morning air. Caleb watched it rise higher, wings catching the sun. "The land forgets blood," he murmured, "but remembers kindness." Sarah reached for his hand, holding it steady in hers, and in that touch, scarred hand in scarred hand, was the beginning of everything.